My name is Emily Parker. I'm 17 years old. I live in a town called Patience. It's smack dab in the middle of Utah. It's so small we don't ever get any visitors. Not even during the fall season when the roads are covered in amber-colored leaves and every windowsill smells like pumpkin spice. Not even during the spring season when the dogwood flowers bloom in their white and pink glory. Not a single moment in my life have I seen someone I don't recognize. Until today, that is. I should mention, before I start talking about this stranger, that I've had a strange week. Today is Saturday. This Monday I heard whispers in the grocery store. I was shopping for potatoes for my mother's amazing potato soup, when I took a trip down the candy aisle to let my mind wander. I went for a bag of Hershey's Kisses when I heard the voice, seemingly of an old woman, whispering in my ear to keep my hands off her damn candy. I apologize for the language, but that's what she said. Tuesday rolled around, and everything seemed somewhat normal. It was around 7:30 p.m. and snow had blanketed every blade of grass in the yard. I threw on my snow boots and a warm coat to take out the trash. I placed the full bag in the back of my dad's pickup truck when I heard the snow crunch behind me. It was a deep-sounding crunch as well. Whatever was behind me had weight behind it. It could have been a bear, it could have been a person, I will never know. I turned to face whatever it could have been and nothing was there. There wasn't even a divot in the snow on the ground. It was still freshly driven everywhere besides the trail that I carved from my front porch. Some may think I'm just hearing things, but there's no mistaking that sound. I'm getting goosebumps just writing this down now. Wednesday was equally disturbing. I took out the trash again that night, expecting another sound, but heard nothing. I attempted to sort myself out, and find a rational solution to why that sound had happened. Maybe a branch had fallen? I went back in the house, took off my excessively heavy coat and snow boots, and crawled into some red flannel-colored pajama pants and a long-sleeve t-shirt that read, "Patience, Utah, come relax." I laid in bed reading a comic book, Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 Issue Number 3, to be exact, when I suddenly felt a large rush of anxiety. My heart began to race. My eyes were looking across my room in a zigzag pattern at what felt like 20 miles per hour. I threw my comic book to the floor and rushed to my window to get fresh air. I thrust the window upwards and looked outside, which was a mistake. The cool breeze blowing, coupled with the snow and the Christmas lights that still hung from my neighbor's roof, made the panic subside temporarily. Then, I heard a dog bark. This was saddening at first, because nobody in my neighborhood owns a dog. I had half a mind to save the poor pup from the cold, when the barking started getting louder and louder. The volume grew consecutively, until it was so loud that it sounded like the dog was in my room, begging for my blood. The louder the barks became, the more human-like it sounded, until eventually the sickening yelps became what sounded like a child or a young adult barking and screaming into my ears. The panic came back tenfold. I was shaking and screaming in my room, holding the back of my head with my hands, begging for the madness to stop. But it wouldn't. It kept screaming and screaming until eventually, it didn't anymore. It stopped all at once when my mother barreled into my room after finally hearing my shouts for help. I told her exactly what happened, knowing she wouldn't believe me. I felt like I was in some old scary movie, where insane and nonsensical things happened to me, and nobody would believe what I'm saying. Except this time, my mother was comforting. Usually the parents in those movies are dismissive and agitated when awoken by the panicked screaming of their kid, especially when no danger is present. This time, my mom brushed my hair, microwaved me a mug of warm milk with added sugar, and sang me to sleep. I must admit, despite being absolutely terrified that night, I slept soundly while my mom sang. It was like the euphoria you feel after finding out you passed a test you were sure you were going to fail, but multiply that feeling by 10. After that admittedly traumatizing experience, it was Thursday. The day went by as usual. Wake up, breakfast, shower, school, you get the idea. The weird thing about Thursday was when I got off the bus after school. I descended 3 stairs from the bus to my front lawn and noticed the snow had melted. It was 12 degrees outside all day. I knew that because the clocks in the school hallways kept time and temperature. The 12 degrees didn't change. I know, this could be easily explained, but it doesn't make sense that when I got off the school bus the temperature outside was 72 degrees. I was burning up in my excessively heavy winter coat with 3 layers on each article of clothing, and it was 72 degrees outside. My neighbor's house no longer had Christmas lights up. My classmates wore layers all day, then were wearing shorts that same day before even getting off the bus. I hadn't seen them change, but they did. I walked in the house and changed into appropriate attire, or what I assumed was appropriate for 72-degree weather in January. I asked my mom what was going on, because it didn't seem right that the weather could change so drastically. Her response was, "What are you talking about, Emily?" I said, "The snow, Mom. It was 12 degrees this morning and now it feels like summer outside." She said, "There hasn't been snow for weeks. Friday night was the worst. Whatever sort of force out there that is tormenting me has a good sense of humor, I suppose, making sure to save the worst for last." I dressed for school in the unseasonable warmth and had the most average and monotonous day imaginable. I came home, ate dinner, took out the trash, and went back inside. My dad was watching television, my mom was reading a book, everything seemed normal. Then, my dad's show was interrupted. It was a breaking news weather report. The weatherman told us that we were under a flash flood warning, and we should lock our doors and shut and cover all windows. I thought it was strange that we were being advised to lock our doors for a storm, but nevertheless my family went to work bolting each door that went outside and pulling down the blinds on every window in the house. I reflected on the day at that point. There hadn't been a cloud in the sky at all. I felt like I was going absolutely crazy. I laid down in my bed and grabbed an old issue of The Avengers, the issue where they have to fight against Magneto alongside the X-Men. I made it about halfway through the book when the loudest thunder I had ever heard threw me from my bed. I landed directly on my back, and it still hurts as I write this as a matter of fact. I laid there in agony for a couple seconds when the rain started. It was a steady, but hard rain. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until thunder struck again. This time it sounded like a gunshot from behind me, which was odd because I was still laying on the floor. The rain grew heavier, then another bang of thunder. This time, however, it sounded less like gunfire, and more like the scream of a woman. I know, it's hard to imagine the sound of a mixture between regular thunder and a shriek, like a scream of fear. But that's the only way I can think to describe this absolutely demonic noise that plagued my room. I continued laying on the floor, praying that the noises would stop. They didn't, of course, and they grew more hellish with time. The rain grew harder and harder, the thunder grew less like thunder and more like the screams of someone that sounded like they were being disemboweled while they were alive. The shrieks even began to grow a gurgle, like someone choking on liquid in my room, and I couldn't do anything to help them. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't control my vocal cords. It was like something had a hold on my throat and was refusing to let go. Eventually, the thunder subsided. The screaming sounds slowly relinquished, but then the lightning started. At first, it was just flashes. Then, it grew into noticeable zigzagging lines in front of my eyes. Electricity zapped at my fingertips. Static licked at my hair. The power in my room went out, leaving me in pure darkness. With each flash of lightning, my room illuminated. I sat up slowly and pressed my back to the wall. As I squinted my eyes to try and make out details of my room in the darkness, the lightning flickered and showed a silhouette in my room. It was a humanoid shadow, standing in the corner. I tried to stand, I tried to call for help, but I felt like a greater power was holding me back. Something wanted me to watch, as if this was a theater act that I was invited to. This seemed to be even more the case, because each flash of light caused the shadow to move across my room and pose in a different way. The poses seemed to resemble the shadow performing a ballet dance. And at the end of the dance, the shadow stepped in front of me. It outstretched its arm and opened its hand. Then, as clear as day, the voice of a woman asked me a question. "Will you dance with me?" Her voice was oxymoronic. It was soft, yet harsh. She was polite, yet demanding. It was like she had the voice of an angel or a middle school-aged girl, but at the same time it seemed like she was a 50-year-old gas station attendant that had smoked for most of her life. It was clear that she wasn't going to ask again. I reached my hand out to hers, without even realizing what I was doing. Before our hands touched, she dissipated. The sunlight burst through my window blinds. The birds began chirping. The light bulbs clicked back on in an instant. The storm was over. I rushed to the window and rolled the blinds up. The grass was covered in snow. Now, it's Saturday. At 3:30 p.m., Mom wanted me to borrow her car earlier and run to the grocery store. She handed me the list and sent me on my way. I normally drive with my right hand on the steering wheel and my left hand pressed firmly against my left leg. I stopped at a red light and looked around the car. It was like I was dissociating. I looked at my reflection in the rear-view mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize. I glanced at my left hand, still placed firmly on my leg, but something was wrong. There was a hole in my skin. A large oval-shaped piece of flesh was missing from where my index finger and thumb connect. I wasn't bleeding, nor was I in pain. I could see my bones and my veins pumping blood. I could squeeze my hand and watch my tendons stretch. I was enthralled until the car behind me blew its horn. I slammed the gas and flew to the grocery store, the same one that had the old woman whispering in my ear. What is happening to me? Why am I seeing these things? Is this early schizophrenia? The trip to the grocery store was nothing crazy. It was what happened on my way back home that is still haunting me. Like I said, it was 3:30 p.m. when I left the house. It was 11 p.m. when I finally got home. It's 4 a.m. now. I didn't take any detours. I didn't stop anywhere else because the store didn't have what I needed. I didn't drag my feet in there either. As I was checking out at the register, I genuinely thought that maybe the worst of it would be over with. It was when I was walking back to the car that I noticed him. A tall man in a trench coat. His black hair in wisps that dangled in front of his face, the details of which I couldn't make out. Not because he was far away or my vision was blurred, but because he was blurry. His face contorted and misshapen like someone had taken a giant pencil eraser and streaked it across him like he was a drawing on a desk. His eyes, nose, and mouth could nearly be made out, but only if you knew that what you were looking at was supposed to be a face. It was as if my brain was filling in the gaps for me so it could make sense of what it was seeing. His head twitched and moved around like he was having constant cold chills rushing down his spine, or he was swallowing broken glass. He raised his hands to his neck and dug his fingers into his collarbone. A whisper was carried from him to me along the wind. "Are you scared of me?" I stood absolutely still, almost like I thought I'd be hidden from his view if I just didn't move. It felt like my legs were jelly and my hair was on fire. Every cell of my body was telling me to run, that I was in danger, that I was in the most danger I'd ever been in before. My eyes darted to the ground, trying to force my legs to move if I just could feel them. At this point I was begging my brain to just let me go. Let me get in the car and speed home away from whatever this thing was. I looked back up at him. He stood still, continuing to twitch his head, but pushing his fingers deeper into his collarbone. His dirty knuckles now forcing their way past his bone. Black blood oozed down his wrists and forearms. "I'm scared of me. I don't want to be in this body anymore." With a shriek, he began ripping chunks of flesh from himself and throwing them onto the ground. I watched in horror as he screamed in pain but continued to rip and tear until he could hold his esophagus with his bare hands. Oh God, Emily. It hurts." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do for him. I didn't know how he knew my name. I cried silently, and a hand touched my back. "Excuse me." I screamed and fell to the ground in shock. The cashier that checked me out stood there, confused. "Ma'am? Are you all right? You've been standing here for a while." I checked my watch. 10:45 p.m. I am sorry. So sorry. I'll go home now. Are you okay to drive? I'm okay. Thank you. It's just been a very long day. I pulled into my driveway, still shaking in fear. I didn't even speak to my parents when I walked in. They didn't even know I entered the house. They didn't know I put away all the groceries. They didn't even know that they were watching TV static. I'm going to sleep now. I hope everything will be better tomorrow.